Have you ever wondered why you keep repeating the same emotional patterns, even when you know better? Why some wounds never seem to heal, no matter how much you try to stay positive? Why relationships, failures, or even silence can trigger storms inside you that you don't fully understand? Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, had a simple yet uncomfortable truth. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That is the essence of emotional intelligence through Jung's eyes. It's not just about managing emotions. It's about transforming your entire relationship with yourself. And this journey doesn't begin with mastering your feelings. It begins by facing what you've ignored. The shadow, the hidden, the hurt, the parts you buried to survive. Let's go deeper. In modern society, emotional intelligence is often reduced to external behavior. Stay calm under pressure, communicate effectively, show empathy. But Jung invites you to ask a more radical question. Why am I really feeling this way? You can train your mind to appear emotionally stable. But if your internal world is full of unprocessed trauma, repressed anger, or unacknowledged fears, you're not in control. Your unconscious is so true. Emotional intelligence, in Jungian terms, requires a descent, an inner journey into the soul. And that's where the idea of the shadow comes in. Jung defined the shadow as the part of yourself that you do not want to be. It contains all the feelings, urges, and impulses that your conscious ego finds unacceptable. Your jealousy, your rage, your fear of being abandoned, your shame for wanting to be seen. And here's the thing. The more you suppress those parts, the more they control you from the dark. Think about it. Ever overreacted to something small and felt confused by your own response? That's your shadow speaking. Ever sabotaged your own success because deep down you didn't feel worthy of it? That's your shadow again. According to Jung, the shadow doesn't disappear by pretending it isn't there. It disappears only when brought into the light of awareness. Emotional intelligence begins not when you control emotions, but when you begin to observe them. Jung encouraged self-reflection as a sacred practice. Not to judge your emotions, but to listen to them like messages from the unconscious. Let's say you feel deep resentment towards someone. Instead of forcing yourself to forgive and forget, ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to show me? Is there an old story here? What part of me feels threatened, disrespected, or unseen? This pause is where the alchemy happens. Because when you witness your emotional reaction with honesty, you reclaim power over it. You stop being a slave to mood swings and start becoming an architect of your emotional world. Jung categorized human consciousness into 4 psychological functions: thinking, intuition, sensation, feeling, and here's the key. Feeling, according to Jung, is not weakness or chaos. It's a rational function. Just like thinking, where thinking evaluates facts, feeling evaluates value. It helps you determine what's important, what's right for you, what resonates with your soul. So to develop emotional intelligence is to trust the feeling function. It means learning to sit with emotions without numbing, fixing, or analyzing them immediately. It means understanding that feelings are not problems. They are information. And once you listen deeply, you realize your emotions aren't against you. They're working for you, showing you where your healing lies. If this resonates with you so far, and you feel ready to dive deeper into Jung's approach to emotional truth, subscribe to the channel right now. This journey isn't about quick fixes. It's about real transformation, and we're rebuilding a space here for people who want to go beyond surface-level growth. People like you in the next will explore how Jung's concept of individuation is the real roadmap to emotional mastery, and how your emotions are guiding you toward your higher self every single day. But before you go, let me ask, Have you ever noticed the same emotional reaction showing up in different situations? What do you think it's trying to teach you about yourself? Comment below. Your insight may help someone else recognize their own shadow. Have you ever felt like something inside you is calling for more? More depth, more clarity, more alignment. But you can't quite explain it. That quiet yet persistent feeling. That's the beginning of individuation. For Carl Jung, emotional intelligence wasn't about becoming nice, calm, or pleasing. It was about becoming whole. Individuation means becoming an individual, and insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self. In other words, real emotional maturity is not about fitting in. It is about becoming who you truly are, beneath the conditioning. Individuation is the lifelong process of integrating all parts of yourself. Your conscious ego, your unconscious impulses, your shadow, your archetypes, your soul's purpose. This isn't a path of perfection. It's a path of radical self-honesty. It asks you to meet the full spectrum of your emotional experiences, especially the uncomfortable ones. Every emotion you feel is an opportunity. Anger points to your boundaries. Sadness reveals your values. Anxiety shows you what matters deeply. Joy confers alignment. Instead of trying to fix your emotions, individuation asks you to befriend them. For Jung, emotions are not noise. They're messages from the deeper self. They're the language of the unconscious, signaling where something within you is not aligned with your truth. But here's the twist. It's actually a soul-level signal that you're outgrowing who you used to be. Sometimes what looks like emotional immaturity. Think of those moments when you couldn't stop crying and didn't know why. Or when rage erupted unexpectedly and left you shaken. Or that eerie calm that came after a breakdown. Not because you were okay, but because something inside finally surrendered. These are not breakdowns. These are breakthroughs trying to happen. Jung emphasized that true growth requires tension of opposites. That means holding your light and your darkness, your desire and your fear. But individuation invites you to face it. Your power and your pain. Most people want to avoid emotional conflict because that's where your transformation lives. There is no birth of consciousness without pain. If you numb one emotion, you numb them all. So emotional intelligence means learning to sit with contradictions, to not rush to fix things, but to allow yourself to feel and understand. Once you realize your emotions are not random, but meaningful, something changes. You stop blaming the world for your triggers. You stop expecting others to manage your peace. You begin listening to what your soul is trying to communicate. That's when you become emotionally intelligent. When you can witness your reactions without being consumed by them, when you recognize patterns and choose differently. When you love yourself through the storm, not just in the calm. It looks like this. Saying no, even when you feel guilty, crying without apologizing for it, setting boundaries without resentment, owning your anger without projecting it. It's sacred and it's powerful. Feeling joy without waiting for it to be taken away. It's messy and you are not alone. Because every time you listen to your emotions and respond with awareness, you become more you. And that is what Jung meant by becoming whole. If this message speaks to you, if you've ever felt torn between who you are and who you're supposed to be, then this is your journey. Subscribe now and stay with us. We're going even deeper into Jung's emotional insights in the next part. We'll explore how emotional intelligence is not just personal, it's spiritual, and how your deepest wounds may be the portals to your greatest power. But before we move on, tell me in the comments, have you ever had an emotion that refused to be ignored? One that kept showing up until you listened? What did it teach you? Have you ever reacted in a way that surprised even yourself? said something in anger and immediately regretted it, felt overwhelming sadness or jealousy and didn't understand where it came from. That's your shadow speaking. According to Carl Jung, we all carry a shadow self. The parts of us that we deny, repress, or are ashamed of. These are not necessarily bad traits. They are simply aspects of our psyche we've pushed into the dark because they didn't fit the image we were taught to present. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Emotions that overwhelm you are often parts of your shadow trying to be seen. The shadow includes the rage you suppress to seem peaceful, the grief you avoid so you look strong, the envy you deny so you feel spiritual. The trauma responses that you confuse with personality. It's the part of you that you didn't choose, but inherited through wounds, culture, family, or fear. And because the shadow is unconscious, it often expresses itself through emotions, especially the ones that feel irrational, intense, or out of control. The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. In simpler terms, emotional intelligence isn't about being perfect. It's about being courageous enough to face what's messy and hidden. Jung would say, your triggers are teachers. If something makes you emotionally reactive, pay attention. It might not be about the person or situation. It might be about an old wound that never got healed. And your psyche is asking for resolution. Let's take examples. You'll criticize at work and feel deep shame, not because of the words, but because your inner child still believes they're never good enough. A friend forgets to text back and you spiral into anxiety, not because of the delay, but because abandonment lives deep in your shadow. These aren't flaws. These are invitations. Emotional intelligence in the Jungian sense means asking, what truth is it hiding? What part of me is crying out to be accepted? What is this feeling protecting? One of Jung's most profound teachings is that we don't just carry a shadow. We often project it onto others. If you've ever judged someone harshly without knowing them, or felt triggered by someone's behavior that mirrors your own denied traits, that's projection. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So, when you're emotionally activated, ask, is this about them or is this about me? What does this reaction tell me about myself? What part of me have I disowned? This doesn't mean you excuse harmful behavior. It means you reclaim your power to respond consciously, not from the wounded ego, but from a centered, aware self. When you begin to face your shadow and integrate it, you stop wasting emotional energy in over-explaining yourself, people-pleasing, avoiding conflict. They're not afraid to be real, trying to control emotions. Instead, you develop something more powerful: presence. A person who knows their shadow walks with quiet strength. They're not afraid to feel. They're emotionally intelligent, not because they suppress emotions, but because they've befriended them. They've stopped fighting parts of themselves, and as a result, they can love others without needing them to be perfect either. Jung believed that one of the greatest shifts in personal evolution is when we move from shame to compassion. You're not emotionally broken, you're emotionally layered. And those layers carry history, memory, archetypes, all waiting to be seen and felt. When you stop shaming yourself for how you feel and start listening with curiosity, you become emotionally wise. This is the sacred alchemy of emotional intelligence, turning emotional chaos into emotional clarity, not through control, but through connection. If you're still here, it means this message is touching something deep in you. And that's not a coincidence. That's synchronicity. Carl Jung believed that when you're ready, life brings you the right messages to grow. Subscribe now and continue this journey with us. In the final part, we'll explore how spiritual transformation begins with emotional integration. and why your most painful emotions might just be the keys to your higher self. But before that, let me ask, what is one emotion you used to fight, but now you're relearning to understand? Share it in the comments. Your insight could inspire someone else's healing. There comes a moment in every journey when we realize we're not just here to survive emotions, we're here to transform through them. Carl Jung never saw emotions as obstacles. He saw them as messages from the deepest parts of the psyche, echoes from the soul trying to speak, and in that sense, every emotional storm is sacred. The times when you were brought to your knees, feeling like life had turned its back on you. Weren't those the moments that cracked something open inside you? Weren't those the seasons where the mask you wore started to feel too heavy, where pretending no longer worked, and all you had left was your raw, unfiltered self? Every tear has meaning. Every breakdown holds the seed of something awakening. Think about it. Jung believed that's when real transformation begins. Not in comfort, but in collapse. You stop fighting your tears. You realize they were never the problem. They were the map. And integration only happens when you allow the whole you to exist. Not just the spiritual, or the intellectual, or the accomplished, but also the broken, the uncertain, the afraid. Maybe it's a signal that your soul wants more truth. The trail of breadcrumbs back to the parts of you that needed your love most. Because when the ego is exhausted, when your strategies fail, when your emotions flood you, there are parts of you that once learned to scream in order to be heard. And now, through your awareness, they're finally being invited to speak in whispers. And there's nowhere left to hide. That's when the self begins to emerge. You say, I see you. You've been with me for a long time. And in that moment of acknowledgement, something shifts. The fear loses power. The you beneath the performance, the you who remembers. The emotion becomes less of a threat and more of a guide. That anger isn't evil. It's a call for boundaries. Breathe. Ask, what is this emotion here to teach me? That shame isn't a verdict. It's a cry for healing. And when you honor those feelings instead of repressing them, something incredible happens. You start to trust yourself. Not the self you present to the world, but the one you were always meant to become. Don't rush to escape it. That's why emotional intelligence in Jung's vision is not just a skill. It's a path, a sacred process, a homecoming. Here, we go beyond surface-level advice. We explore the soul. It's looking at your deepest fears. And instead of running from them, you sit beside them. Because here's the secret. Your emotions are not enemies. They're protectors. You begin to understand that sadness isn't weakness. It's longing for connection. You become emotionally intelligent not because you have perfect control, but because you have profound compassion. You stop blaming yourself for being human. Jung often said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But becoming that person requires one essential ingredient: integration. So maybe your anxiety is not a flaw. Maybe your sensitivity isn't a burden. Maybe it's a superpower. A mirror reflecting the emotional currents others ignore. Maybe your emotional intensity is the very fire that will burn through every false identity you've ever been given and leave only the gold of who you really are. When the emotions settle, when the silence comes, when all the noise is stripped away, you'll find something waiting in the stillness. You. The you beneath the survival. And it is there, in that deep remembering, that emotional intelligence becomes spiritual intelligence. Because now, you don't just understand your feelings. You honor them. You learn from them. And you use them as instruments of transformation. In your life, your relationships, your purpose. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, triggered, or afraid, instead, pause, because that's where your power lives. not in knowing all the answers, but in listening for the deeper truth. And maybe, just maybe, that emotion isn't there to break you. It's there to open the door to a new version of you. The version that knows how to feel and still stay rooted. The version that carries scars, but also wisdom. The version that finally says, I'm ready to be whole. If this journey into Jung's vision of emotional intelligence has spoken to your heart, make sure to subscribe right now. And now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching or listening from today? And which part of this message resonated with you the most? Drop it in the comments, because your story might be the light someone else needs.